Ready.
I was 19, and nothing mattered to me except loving George C. Scott. The first time I saw George C. Scott was in 1952. He was 26 years old and about to strangle a defenseless old woman in a wheelchair. He was playing the part of Danny, the mad murderer, in Night Must Fall on the stage of the Stevens College Playhouse. That maniacal smile, that frighteningly fierce strength.
Sit down.
At that moment, I thought to myself, I'm going to marry him one day. George was a staff actor at Stevens College, and I was a theater major. I remember being 3 and having a walk-on role in the production of Cinderella. After the show, I had said, Mommy, I want to be an actress always. I knew that the stage and films would become my life. I swore I'd never give them up for anything or anybody. For the next several months, I would spend every possible chance in the Playhouse watching George C. Scott in rehearsals. Instead of going to class, I would spend many days in the darkened theater. As my grades sunk, my heart soared. Finally, I was cast in a one-act play alongside George. I finally had the chance to be near him, to speak to him, even if it was just on stage. But during rehearsal, I found that I couldn't look into his eyes without my entire body shaking.
Karen, I've noticed that when you say your lines to the other actors, you look at them, but not when you speak to me.
I know I have an ugly puss, but if you could
I know I have an ugly puss, but if you could bring yourself to look at me, it might help both of us, especially in scene 2, where we're arguing.
I will. I'm sorry.
You're doing it right now, Karen. Look at me. Are you afraid of me? Or do you just not like me? Whoa! You could have broken your neck. You all right?
Yes. Thank you. I'll be more careful next time.
It was at a coffee shop sometime after that when he professed his love for me. Night after night, I would sneak out to be with him. Each escapade consisted of us parking the car somewhere hidden,
Keep looking around.
my roommate covering for me until I came home and climbed the spiked 6-foot fence to sneak in after curfew. Once the school year ended, George convinced me to take an apprenticeship in Ohio, where he would be a staff actor. One day, he drove us to the park and lay out a blanket on the grass. He reached into his shirt pocket and brought out a scrolled silver wedding ring. It belonged to his mother. We were floating among the stars and the moon, George saying my name over and over again.
Tell me your dreams for the future.
I was thinking somewhere around 9 kids.
9? How about 2?
Sure, and they'll both look like you.
And we'll live in one of those English Tudor-style houses. Of course, you'll be a famous actor.
As well as you, my dear.
We'll be fabulously wealthy.
We'll have a ranch house in Montana, and I'll teach you to ride, little lady.
And a beach house in Cape Cod.
Well, this all sounds pretty swell, but we must have 5 dogs.
That moment would have been perfect if it weren't for the fact that I lost his mother's ring somewhere in the grass. As devastated as I was, he reassured me that it was all right, and never resented me for it. He would go on to ask me to marry him several times throughout many, many years. We never married. Oh, George was married. He was always married. He had a wife and a baby back at home. And although I felt sorry that he was so torn between me and his family, he made it clear that he was in love with me. And I was deeply, uncontrollably in love with him. So the marriages never bothered me. If I had let it bother me, I could never have been with him. But I could see that it made him more desperate every day. George was a notorious drunk. Everyone in the theater knew it. But I think the affair was making it worse. Ohio was going great for us. I was taking on roles in the plays and was given the leading lady part in Brighten the Corner. That meant I was playing George's wife. George himself was gaining a lot of attention. Every review was a rave. He was constantly getting interviewed and would sell out the show each night.
Action.
Despite this seemingly happy time, it became obvious that George was drinking, especially before arriving to the theater. He came in later each evening, looking unkempt and slurring his words. Several times as I watched him stagger to the wings, I wondered if he should go on. But the moment he made his stage entrance, he seemed to sober up. He would drink until he could hardly stand up. Then 2 minutes later, he would be on stage, not missing a word, and right in character. Except one evening, it nearly took a toll on both of us. I met him at his car after the show one night, and it was clear that he was drunk. He insisted on going for a drive. It was raining, and the car was skidding everywhere, with no help from his erratic driving, and we nearly hit a man crossing the street. He started driving the wrong way down Toledo Highway. I kept screaming for him to stop, but it seemed like he had become Mr. Hyde. He was saying things like, "It's better this way," and "I don't want a future without you. This is the only way. Nothing matters anymore." Finally, I got him to stop. He seemed to calm down, and although I hit my head when he slammed on the brakes, I was just thankful that George didn't kill us. We promised one another that we would find a way to deal with this madness, and we drove home. George eventually found a solution. He invited me to move to New York with him to get acting jobs. This short, or perhaps lifetime trip to New York would mean no sneaking around. It would mean I could live with him. It would mean I could unapologetically be with him. Shortly after his invite, I was offered an acting position at a winter stock company in Michigan. It was an equity theater, and it was an opportunity that not many young actresses got. It was a once-in-a-lifetime offer. I turned it down to stay with George. New York was a dream at first. George bought me a dollar ring from Woolworth's 5 and Dime, and we played the young and broke but madly in love married couple. Finding acting work was difficult, so I had to take a job as a dental assistant to support us. This new marriage with George was lovely, but it also revealed a new side to him. He would always go out looking for auditions, but usually came back defeated and drunk. I learned that his real wife back at home was pregnant again. He went home to visit her for Thanksgiving. It was on that trip when I discovered that I myself was pregnant. Once George came back, I told him. Oh, he was not happy. He tried to convince me to have an abortion, cursing the timing of it. He especially did not like that I would give no thought into having an abortion. I thought to myself, why should I, while his wife back home gets to keep hers? Absolutely not. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I was going to keep this child, our child. A few days later, I awoke to the feeling of drowning in sand. I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't open my mouth. Something held my head down, and when I pushed up, it would push back. I kicked as hard as I could, and suddenly was released. I could smell gas. George? I recalled the time he was madly driving in Ohio. George! George tried to kill me. As upset as I was at first, I forgave George for his moment of insanity. But I wouldn't stay with him. I left to stay at Florence Crittenden, home for unwed mothers. Life just went on after my time with George C. Scott. My family was disheartened when I told them about my relationship with George and the pregnancy, but they were ecstatic when I married a man who would adopt my daughter. I married a few times, as I understood George did as well. It wouldn't be for another 25 years until I saw George again. When we met again, it felt like the love had never left us. At this point, he really was a famous actor, as I had predicted years before. We took grand trips together. He asked me to marry him. But just as before, there would come a time when I would have to leave George behind. And life would go on.